Welcome to CPAC Now. As you know, the Senate is going to be talking about this terrible monstrosity called S1. In the House side, it's called HR1. This is this whole attempt to get rid of voter verification and to nationalize all the state laws. We're going to be talking to Denise Cohen about that. We're going to have former Congressman Dave Brad on, who is now the dean of the business school at Liberty University and a great friend of CPAC. But first off, we're going to hear about everything that's going on around the globe. We have so much anxiety about what's happening inside our country, but there's unfortunately also a lot to be anxious about what's going on with this Biden foreign policy around the globe. We are now joined by the former director of DNI and ambassador to Germany, Rick Grinnell. Rick, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, guys. So good to see you. This is a no anxiety show, though. We're gonna talk about solutions. No anxiety.
I love it. I love that approach. Maybe you can come to our house and take out the anxiety out of our poor children, where some of them are stuck at home. But I agree, it is about solutions. But Rick, let's be honest. What we're looking at right now with the Biden administration, their silence on what we're seeing happening in this situation in Israel, where Hamas basically has attacked Israel with several rockets. They were targeting this country and the Israeli people. We got to be concerned. Aren't we concerned about this?
We have to be very concerned. Imagine for a moment, I think that what we want to say to our CPAC audience is, imagine if we were getting rockets from Canada or Mexico. I think it would take the American people and the American government about 5 minutes to respond with incredible force to say, knock it off, this is not going to happen. And that's what's happening in Israel. There's a lot of talk about Israel having an iron dome. I want to be very clear to the Palestinian people and to the Palestinian Authority. You have the ability to have an iron dome as well to ensure that nobody attacks you. Don't attack others. That's your iron dome. Your security is don't start throwing rockets and start controlling Hamas. We all know, Matt and Mercy, we all know that this is coming from the Iranian regime. You look at the Ayatollah's Twitter feed, and he's been talking about this for the last week, saying that Israel isn't a country, saying that the Palestinian issue is ground zero for all Arabs. This attack is clearly being supported by the Iranian regime. And I have to say, this is what's troubling with the Biden administration, because you look at the change in policy from Trump to Biden when it comes to the Middle East, and look no further than we've invited the Iranian regime to talks and said that we're going to redo the JCPOA Iran deal. We've started giving money to the Palestinian Authority after Donald Trump froze them out. And what do we get when the United States government gives money to the Palestinian Authority, gives access to the Iranian regime to U.S. Diplomacy, tactics, and negotiation? We get this response on Israel? Well, I think someone needs to tell Jake Sullivan this is not working. His weakness, his ability to go out and pay the Palestinian Authority and reward the Iranian regime is coming back and making us not secure. It's making American security a issue once again in the Middle East.
Rick, do you think that the Ayatollah should have a Twitter feed?
Look, Twitter has kicked off Donald Trump, but the Ayatollah is allowed to have a Twitter feed. So is Foreign Minister Zarif, the Iranian regime foreign minister, who constantly spews hate. Look, we just saw the Iranian regime allow the beheading of a young gay man inside Iran. This is a regime that's brutal, that denies basic human rights on a daily basis. The irony is that the Iranian regime is allowed to be on Twitter, but the Iranian people are not, nor is Donald Trump.
So what do you believe is going to be the timeline for Biden to move in removing these sanctions on Iran? Obviously they've already kind of shown their hand that that's the direction they're going to go in.
Yeah, I think there's two troubling signs coming out of Jake Sullivan's NSC. One is word that the Iranians are saying, which is they're going to be rewarded just for coming to the table. We're going to loosen sanctions on them just because they decide to show up at a meeting. And this is the problem of the Democratic progressive left. And I will say many in Europe as well, is that they believe that scheduling a meeting is actually progress. I actually believe scheduling a meeting is a tactic towards getting us to a conversation that might or might not provide progress. But the Democrats always view this differently. They want to reward people for coming to a meeting, and I think that's dangerous. And the second thing that we have to be really concerned about is the news coming out that the Biden administration has allowed the British government to pay for hostages and the return of hostages. Now, when you do that, you automatically increase the value on a Western head, on an individual of a Western country. And that's dangerous because that just means an American is going to be taken in the future in order to have a bounty put on their head, and a Western government will be asked to pay, and it will be more money than we've ever paid before. So the precedent for paying for a hostage release is a terrible precedent and makes every one of us less safe.
Matt, if I can jump in real quick. I know we've seen several congressmen as well as senators come out and basically condemn the attack by Hamas on Israel. But one congresswoman in particular, Ilhan Omar, as we know, she came out and basically was very critical of Israel, saying Israeli airstrikes killing civilians in Gaza is an act of terrorism. Palestinians deserve protection. Unlike Israel, missile defense programs such as Iron Dome don't exist to protect Palestinian civilians. It's unconscionable to not condemn these attacks on the week of Eid. Am I right to say that?
Yeah.
And so, Ted Cruz responds by saying, why is a member of Congress acting as a press secretary for Hamas? Your reaction?
Look, let me just drop back for a second and go with me on this thinking for a moment. Susan Rice has been appointed as domestic policy advisor. That's a joke. She doesn't know anything about domestic policy. However, what it indicates is that we are going to run our international policy, of which Susan Rice is an expert. She was at the UN. She was national security advisor. She was rumored to be Secretary of State, but she didn't have the votes, the Senate confirmation votes enough to get there. So she's a foreign policy expert that's been placed in the domestic policy role. And that is just a clear signal that all of our international issues, our foreign policies, are going to be treated like domestic policy. And what this means is when you read Ilhan Omar's tweet, this is a problem for the Democratic Party. The foreign policy mess that they are creating is a mess because they are placating the far left domestically. It's part of that cancel culture, identity politics. They're beating up on Israel because it pleases the far left. They are trying to reach out to Iran and pretend like the Iranian regime should be respected because it pleases the far progressive left. This is the upside down world of the Biden administration. President Biden is too weak to stop the progressive lefts from taking over the domestic and foreign policy. Yep. Kamala Harris does not understand what's going on because she's not an expert on foreign policy. And Susan Rice is really happy that Biden is too weak. Kamala is totally distracted with the 50-50 Senate and has to be up at the Senate. She's running the show. We have a shadow president in Susan Rice, and no one is paying attention.
I completely agree, and I'd even go a step further, which is I think that means that the Obamas have a big role in what's going on in the 100%. Biden administration as well. They got all these kids that had jobs in the Obama administration that now have more senior jobs. In the Obama administration, and have more senior jobs in the Biden administration, and they're doing all the things that Barack Obama was actually too politically careful to say. They're actually just pushing the buttons, and Joe Biden's reading the cue cards.
Look, when you talk about this administration being Obama's third term, you do not get pushback from these Obama people. You get smiles and chuckles. You get, oh gosh, they take it as a compliment.
They do. It's the truth. And I think that domestic policy in this administration is tucking somebody in for his afternoon nap. But the other thing I think that's very serious with Susan Rice in this position and these other people, you have this Iran nuclear deal. You and Mercy were discussing the sanctions. At the end of the day, the big mistake or purposeful mistake that Republicans made was not treating this Iran deal as a treaty where it wouldn't have had the votes in the Senate. Do you see any hope of us pressuring them to treat this as a treaty, which is what it is?
Well, first of all, the Obama administration couldn't have made it a treaty because it didn't have the support in the Senate, as you know. And
Yep.
that's why it was, it should have been viewed, the JCPOA should have been viewed as an executive order, because they didn't have it as a solidified policy past the Obama administration. I got asked a lot when I was in Germany by Germans, by Chancellor Merkel, by others, is like, why are you so dismissive of this international agreement, the JCPOA? And I said, look, put the JCPOA and the Paris Accord into the same box, which is that it was neither one of them were treaties. To be a treaty, you have to have it pass the Senate. And President Obama was smart enough to know that he couldn't bring it to the Senate because it wouldn't have passed. Neither one of them wouldn't have passed. They had to treat it like an executive order. And so I would say in Germany, don't be surprised when the Obama policy of JCPOA that you signed, that you all went in on, don't be surprised when it goes away with the Trump administration, because it wasn't a treaty. And the lesson for the Europeans is, if you're going to sign up with the Americans for something really firm long-term, ensure that American politics treats it like a treaty. Give it to the Senate, let it pass, and then it's more substantive and more international. But if you don't do that, just make sure you're not surprised when the next president comes in and gets rid of it.
That's a great point, but I got to say something on the record. If Rick Grenell, if they were to make him domestic policy advisor, I'd be all for it. Okay, I don't know what you're talking.
You mean for Biden?
No,
Oh.
for the next Republican president, that or Secretary of State, or California governor would be nice. But before we go into California politics, we also had an issue with Colonial Pipeline Company last week, where they shut down the pipeline following a ransomware attack that the U.S. officials believe is linked to a criminal gang known as DarkSide. Why is this so troubling? Why should Americans be anxious about the fact that our energy infrastructure is being attacked?
Well, first of all, this is a complicated issue, and let's try to unwind it a little bit. For one thing, I believe that the private companies who run these pipelines, remember, we have a system in the United States where it's not publicly owned. Private companies run these pipelines. They run a lot of our infrastructure. It's not state owned like it is in other countries. And so we should be setting the example where we say to our private companies, you're getting a lot of savings off technology. You're able to, employ fewer people because of technology. You're able to do things a lot faster because of technology. But remember that as you do that, technology has an innate risk of things like cyber attacks. And so if you're not spending the money that you're saving by utilizing technology, if you're not spending the savings on beefing up your cybersecurity, then you're at fault. And many of these companies can do a better job of making sure that they are utilizing technology and cyberware to the fullest extent of what's available. You may have to go outside and hire companies that know how to protect your intellectual property. You don't want your data being put on the DarkSide's website, because then you are going to lose contracts because you don't look like you're a very good private company that can secure data. So I want to put the emphasis as much as possible on these private companies who have to scramble when there's an attack. What they need to do before there's an attack is go out and spend the money to ensure that they are protecting their infrastructure. That's going to benefit all of us. We should insist that the private companies invest and do that. It's not always government's responsibility. However, I'll just quickly finish and say it is DHS and the Department of Transportation. Both of them are jointly responsible for transporting commerce through pipelines even, and they're going to have to step in and help identify the actors and benchmark what companies should be doing. They're not responsible for protecting necessarily, but they are responsible for creating the infrastructure around it.
That's right.
And be careful, because when Democrats see an emergency like this is, they often use it to do something bad, like nationalize an asset. And I worry that that's what they might do if these private entities don't take the steps you're talking about.
And this is such a great point, and we should really emphasize that is in a crisis. Remember, Rahm Emanuel, who's now our nominee to Japan. I don't know if you heard that news. He's going to be the ambassador to Japan.
It's an important post.
Maybe he's going to help us with CPAC Japan now, right? We'll have.
I don't think we're going to get invited to the ambassador's residence like we were with Bill Hagerty. I just have this feeling.
Well, we should put the invite out right now to Rahm Emanuel. If you're going to represent all of the people through being a U.S. ambassador, we would expect to see the CPAC Japan event at the embassy. Anyway, but your point is so good here, in that Democrats will view this situation as saying, oh my gosh, we've got to tax you, we've got to do something, we've got to spend all sorts of money, taxes are now have to be increased, because they're going to tell the American people that the responsibility for securing these pipelines are somehow the Department of Energy, the Department of Homeland Security, or the Department of Transportation. We are in terrible situation if they are responsible. We believe in America that the private companies who get the money to provide the pipelines, who provide the services, we believe the private companies have a responsibility. They need to spend the money when they're up for renewal, or when they're trying to show us that they're a responsible company. They need to be able to provide the American public with assurances that they're protecting the data and intellectual property against cyber attacks.
So, Rick, I know we got to wrap up here, but just one quick question. Which job did you prefer better, being ambassador to Germany or being director of DNI?
I thought you were going to ask me something else. I'm glad.
We could ask you another question, but let me just start there.
I can't think of another question. Well, maybe I could.
I have several others.
Yeah, I know you can. Here's the. I'm going to be honest. I enjoyed both of those two jobs immensely, but I have to say that being a special envoy for Serbia and Kosovo was an incredible opportunity. I had the support of President Trump. We made some great progress. I love the people of the Balkans. And that short-term, a little more than a year and a half job was incredibly fulfilling for me personally.
Well, you filled in more in 4 years in terms of the impact you've had on foreign policy and really standing strong for America. So we thank you for your leadership and your service and your strong, bold voice that we need every single day. So we are eternally grateful for you. And
we'll see you at CPAC in Texas, July 9th to the 11th for Canal.
See you there.
Welcome back to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. We just had this great conversation with Rick Grenell on foreign policy, but there is so much going on here in the swamp, especially as the liberal media keeps saying, the socialist media keeps saying that the GOP, they're fighting, aren't they? We're in complete disarray. What do you think?
We're in a civil war, a revolutionary war, a world war. You pick what kind of war we're in. We're in it.
Cold War?
It's called a disagreement, which everyone has all over politics. But when Republicans have a disagreement, it's a war.
It's a war, baby. But you ended up tweeting, of course, in your tweet therapy.
You mean me?
The children are yelling at in the house. Have been talking with GOP House members via mobile. What do you think? Like, what are you going to be calling?
I'm just saying I'm calling them on their mobile phones.
Okay, great. They all say similar things. The vote this week on leadership has nothing to do with Trump's support, but it is a basic conference desire to make a change. I think both members will be happier eventually, media getting it wrong.
That's right. I mean, from my point of view, is if Liz Cheney is kicked out of her leadership role, and I think everybody's saying she will be, It's less about
She wants to be kicked out.
yeah, but it's much less about who said what about Trump, and a lot more about her general popularity within the conference. Look, there's different kinds of members. Our next guest would have been really bad in House leadership, I want you to know, because he would not have just gone along with the crowd if he thought it was wrong. And those members that have strong opinions and don't just want to go along with the crowd are better outside of leadership, trying to urge leadership to make better decisions. Those members who are comfortable with, you have to tuck in your sail sometimes and say, I lost the argument around the table, I'm going out to the cameras, and I got to defend the policy. They're better in leadership. It's just, you have to ask yourself what kind of person you are.
Okay, introduce our next guest. Come on.
And our next guest is somebody who understands this very well, because he was in the doghouse, the woodshed, whatever you call it, all the time with every Republican leader. Great crusading conservative, Dave Bratt. Dave, how are you, sir?
Hey, doing good, Schlaps. Great to be on. And just a technical correction, no opinions here. At the Liberty School of Business and the university, it is knowledge, not opinion.
Well, you have so many titles. You're a dean, you're a congressman, but you were probably never going to be speaker. Is that fair?
Yeah, that was a rough one. The Boehner, my first vote, Boehner's young guy called me up to go to the back room and meet Boehner. And I said, you tell Boehner I love him, I respect him, but I'm not getting near him. I ain't going to back room.
No back rooms with Boehner for Dave Bratt.
No back room. I ain't going back there.
Well, it would include a bottle of wine and some cigarettes. But
right.
How is this going to play out when we see this vote happening in conference? Give us behind the scenes. What's going to happen?
Well, unfortunately, nothing's going to happen. I mean, it's much ado about nothing, right? I like Liz and I like Elise both personally. Liz is very committed to her views. I mean, she's dogmatic to the extent that she lacks a sense of humor. If I ever pushed her in the aisle and said, hey, what about this? And just being funny, it wasn't funny. And then Elise is nice, but she's going to be a moderate, and she's going to bow before McCarthy and Scalise and whoever and say it doesn't matter who the third is. You're not going to change, like, for example, the Obamacare vote. Elise would have nothing to do with that if she's three. Neither would Cheney. Or take a tax thing or a budget. They tell you it's going to be $1.1 trillion deficit 5 months ahead of time before you even start your committee work. So it's got nothing. It's just theater.
Congressman, does this mean that the Freedom Caucus will have probably even more sway than ever as leadership does kind of like stay in a congealed group?
Yeah, and now you're warming up. Right now they should have an outsized voice. And why isn't Jim Jordan in leadership when he led the country for the last couple of years, right? So that would make a difference. If you put, Jordan or somebody like that, or Perry or Warren Davidson, they're all very solid, grounded conservatives. They'd all be fine. And then still nothing would change because you got 1/3 of leadership. The only one that matters is the speaker, right? Under Paul Ryan, I learned that. I liked Paul a lot personally. He's a good Catholic, smart guy, but no leadership, nothing changed.
But I would argue Congressman Scalise is probably the strongest on more aligned with conservative values than I would say the others. But I think, don't we need to be at a point that we're united, moderates and conservatives, because a real fight's going to be with the socialists and the communists on the other side?
Yeah, no, that's right. I ran against Eric Cantor on the Republican creed. I said that's what we ought to unite around. There's nothing wrong with the creed. The only problem is no Republicans follow the Republican creed, right? So, Scalise is good, but he was in leadership when we got. What did we achieve when we had the House and the Senate and the White House? A tax cut for the rich. Okay, good. I'm pro-business. That's all good. I'm for that. It makes the economy grow, but that's not sufficient, and the whole base knows it's not. And then Trump comes in. You got a corrupt FBI, a corrupt CIA. You got China. You got barbed wire around the Capitol. You got a border incursion. Where's our leadership on any of the key issues that the base wants to hear about? They're AWOL.
Right. Congressman, the other dynamic that's happening is the decoupling, and the American Conservative Union is playing a role in this. The decoupling between corporate America and conservative activists who have always done their bidding for their economic policies, but these conservative activists, when they see these woke CEOs, actually don't want to do their bidding anymore. And and the idea that Joe Biden and the Democrats want to dramatically increase these corporate taxes, I'm not so sure the conservative movement is going to give a lick about that.
No, that's right. And that ESG group, right? Justin Danhoff and Ginny Thomas and that group, Back to Neutral. I don't think the average American knows what's going on with the Fortune 500 and the woke stuff and the pressure on them from the left and the conservatives. I'm even worried that Young can win in Virginia. The one thing that caught my eye there was the lack of numbers, right? We were expecting a huge turnout and it wasn't. And I saw that, right, when we ran against Obama, my base came out in full force, huge numbers, huge energy. And then once you're in, it faded and faded and faded. I'm worried about the conservative base. Even if we do unify, getting our own folks out, that's hard work.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, obviously in Virginia, you've got the convention models. It's the convention versus the primaries. So it's really those hardcore grassroots activists coming out. But let me ask you a question. As we're going into 2022 and the midterm elections, there seems to be what I see as two areas, really the border crisis and then the reopening up of schools being critical. And I would say the third piece is the economy. Where do we think the economy is going to be a year from now? As we're hearing mixed messages, we obviously saw a dismal job report number last week, but now we're seeing the economy, gain some steam with the concerns of inflation.
Yeah, well, it's the right question. The economy, right? Not the financialization, not the stock market. The economy is a dead corpse laying there, white as a ghost on the table, dead, right? So that's the economy. But when you pump $10 trillion, right? The debt was 20 trillion, and now it's going to be 30 trillion. When you dump 10 trillion in fiscal policy and another 7 trillion in monetary stimulus, a sugar high of blood flow through that corpse, the corpse does move again. And if you borrow $10 trillion from your rich uncle, it is true that your income just went up by a lot, right? So you're going to spend a lot. Consumption is 70% of the economy. So hooray, every line is going up, right? Every single indicator is up, up, up. That's true. But the real economy is a corpse that if you took away that stimulus and your inflation point adds to that, how in the world can you have 17 trillion in stimulus and not have inflation? That's more proof that you have a corpse on your hand, right? And so eventually, right, and you got a bubble for sure. Where that turns up, we'll find out. But that's brewing there. That's an absolute certainty.
Where was Dave Bratt when I was taking economics in college? Because my economics professors all sounded a lot different from you. They all talked about the sugar high helping poor people or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Sean, you could always go back to school and go to Liberty University.
I love Liberty. I want our kids to go there. Now, Dave Bratt, here's the final question for you.
Yep.
You've been in Congress. You've been a political observer. You've been that renegade, taking on someone in leadership and winning. I get the sense, despite what you said about the turnout in Virginia, as we travel the country and we're heading off to meet with Second Amendment advocates this week, I get the sense that people are very fired up over this socialism and nonsense and really radicalism coming from the Biden administration and Nancy Pelosi. I get the sense we got a big wave brewing out there. Am I being too optimistic?
I might be soured because of my sour experience, but my indicator, you guys are across the country, so you got a broader view. If I look at the suburbs in Richmond or Northern Virginia, which is totally addicted to the federal thing. So
they benefit during these times.
So it could be too biased, but I have not seen the suburbanites come back our way, and they're not excited, and they're certainly not conservative. And they're not rebelling against any of it. So, maybe quietly they're coming back, but I hope it's there, man. I hope it's there for the sake of this country.
You got to go to Red America. You're going to go with us to one of these red states, and you're going to see how fired up these people are.
CPAC, Texas, July 9th through the 11th.
That's right.
You're coming with us.
You're going to see how fired up they are.
You invite me. I'm in Red America right here in Lynchburg. I'm in the zone. So, I get that, but I just look at the numbers, right? When the cities and you just look at the groups we have against us, 18% of the economy, 18% of people in healthcare, right now against us, all the teachers, all the higher ed against us, all government workers, all state government workers, all local government workers. Maybe, you just go, who do we got left? We got police and firemen or something, patriots and the military and
we got everybody. People. We got everybody who has to fill up a truck with diesel or gasoline. We got people who are trying to run little businesses, not even small, but little businesses, can't find any employees. We got parents who thought that all this woke stuff was great when it was about like recycling, but when their 9-year-old gets asked if their sexual orientation, they don't like that. They don't like the fact that kids aren't in school. So we're going to have you back on, and I'm going to convince you that what's happening in this country is going to fire Pelosi, because I'm pretty confident I'm right here. But I know you're the dean, okay?
No, you're right. Small businesses, those guys 5 years ago were just fried to the point I hate all of you. That was I don't trust any of you. I ain't showing up. So maybe they show up. If they show up, that small business, that is the key. And then half of evangelicals still don't vote. And the Catholics better get their tune straight any day now too. They're way off course.
Well, we just got to get the Catholics to stop listening to the Pope. I'm going to get a lot of heat for saying that, not on economics anyway, right, Dave? Thank you, Dave Bratt, for joining us again on CPAC Now. Keep up the great work down there at Liberty University. We appreciate all the students that come to our CPAC events, and we appreciate that you're teaching them that 2 + 2 = 4, because that's really revolutionary.
Yep, appreciate you guys too. Hey, we got a 500 CEO conference at Liberty, August 10, 11, 12. So CEOs out there that want to be friends in the faith and share an optimistic vision, that come on out.
That'd be great. Yeah.
That's awesome. And hey, do me a favor when they go down there, Dave. Have them sign a manifesto or a letter about the fact that they're going to stay focused on returning value to their shareholders and not on making political points. That'd be nice.
They anyone that comes here, I guarantee you they'll sign that one in 5 seconds.
All right. Thank you, Dave Bratt. And we're going to be right back to CPAC Now after this short break.
Hi, this is Mercedes Schlapp. Welcome back to CPAC Now. Yes, my other half is missing, but he's probably have to deal with a bunch of children that I'm not dealing with right now. But we need to get a very important update today from our director of the Center to Protect Voters and Their Voices, Denise Cohen. Thank you for joining me on CPAC Now,
Marcy.
America Uncanceled. So you've been monitoring all day the Senate hearing that's happening, the Senate markup that's happening. It's the Senate Rules Committee. They're doing the markup on S1, which is the For the People legislation. What do we know?
So for a quick background, S1 is the Senate version of HR1, which we've been all talking about since it passed the House in March. There are virtually no changes to whatsoever. It's pretty much the same thing. So we can refer to them, they're interchangeable. Today, what's happening is that senators are proposing amendments to the bill as it exists in the Senate right now. And there are about 17 amendments, and they are being voted, at least on the Democrat side, strictly along party lines. There are some Republicans that have voted to support some of the Democrat amendments, but not a single Democrat has supported any of the Republican amendments yet, proposed amendments yet.
So
that's what's going on.
Tell our viewers what's in S1. I mean, it's equivalent to HR1, but when you're reading this piece of legislation, what concerns you the most?
Well, at the highest level of all, it's an attempt by Congress to take over our elections that are meant to be controlled and legislated at the state level. And that's because all of the states are so different. We know individually what has to take place in our local communities, and the laws are designed for that. What HR1 and S1 are trying to do is take that to Washington, D.C. and control all of it from one place. And just to show the absurdity of it, one of the things that people have been talking about is, giving out food and water in the line. Should it be at 100 feet? Should it be restricted to 25 feet? Well, who knows? Only the local people would know that best. So that's an example of some of the absurdity here.
So I think, Denise, it is what I would consider a dangerous bill and a push towards a one-party system. But what we're seeing is that the Democrats, and especially Senator Schumer, Chuck Schumer, they're really honing in and making an all-out aggressive effort to get this legislation passed in the Senate. In fact, we saw Senator Mitch McConnell go to this committee hearing, which is rare to see such high levels of leaders, Senate leaders, attend this committee meeting. I mean, the stakes are high.
The stakes are really high, and actually one of the most outspoken senators all morning so far has been Senator Cruz, and he makes, you know, he's got that Supreme Court lawyer mind, and he makes these really sharp points. And, you know, unfortunately, his stuff is still getting, you know, knocked down by the Democrats. You know, perfect example of one of the most important ones that he brought up has to do with automatic voter registration. And I don't know how many people are aware that what that means is anybody that's connected to any of the federal agencies would automatically be registered. That means that any illegal immigrant who's getting welfare, and there are many, it's at a ratio of about 2 to 1, immigrant families, non-citizen families are getting welfare, they would automatically be registered to vote. Senator Cruz he proposed an amendment that would just require them to provide proof of citizenship rather than just a statement that they are citizens. And that got voted down. It couldn't be more clear that Democrats actually want to use this to bring in as many illegal votes as they can muster.
Right, and we've seen that a vast majority of Americans agree that we should have voter ID. That should be a critical part of it. We just even saw the Queen of England say that people in Great Britain need to make sure they present a voter ID in order to vote. I thought that was interesting. Let me predict, Denise, do you think Meghan Markle's going to come out opposing the Queen of England?
Well, you know what? I hope that if she does, it doesn't get any kind of coverage. It's so sad.
Hello, have you seen the Oprah interview? Come on.
I actually couldn't sit through the whole thing.
You know, let me quickly just ask you this question, because we know, for example, that one of the big issues that the Democrats keep bringing up was the fact of ensuring that there would be water and food provided when you would go and vote. Why this obsession with the water and food?
I'm not sure if it's a ploy to make Republicans look like awful people, you know, or if it's a way to get in some underhanded electioneering. It is really the most absurd thing, and it's not rational, at least from our perspective. There's no restriction on bringing your own water. There's no restriction on friends bringing it. It's basically saying anybody that's a paid political operative should not be doing any kind of electioneering close to the point of voting. So, for example, I think, you know, if somebody comes and offers you a bottle of water and says, you know, I'm just here supporting my cousin, the sheriff, who's running, enjoy the water. I mean, maybe that will tilt a vote. That's one of the reasons why they don't want it. It's not to say that you couldn't put out a water station. It's just to say that you can't personalize these things. They're actually talking about should protein bars be handed out. And so the question became, do we really want that on the House or the Senate to be deciding what kind of food is permissible in a line to vote? It shows the absurdity of this.
Well, it might have to only be plant-based protein bars, but Denise Cohen, where can our viewers go if they want to learn more and follow what's happening with this markup, with this hearing, in addition to what's happening in just across the states with these voting laws?
Well, okay, all day today we've actually been live streaming it on our site on the Center to Protect Voters and Their Voices, which is at election.conservative.org, or through conservative.org directly. You can get there. And if you go there, you know, the live stream will probably be over by the end of the day, but there's a telephone number to call your senators and let them know what you think about this. Whatever it is that you think, let them know that you care one way or the other. And also, you can learn more about HR1 and S1. There's a summary of HR1, which is very similar to S1 at this point. There's almost no point of differentiation. Once the amendments are done, we'll try to cover that. But that's a great place to go to learn more about it. And we're trying to keep it updated in real time.
Well, thank you, Denise. Denise Cohen, our director for the Center to Protect Voters and Their Voices. I got to tell you, she's working 24/7 to make sure that you all have the updated information and points that you need to understand what these legislations are doing, what they're pushing, and what these Democrats are trying to do to build a one-party system, in addition to basically getting rid of voting verification, getting rid of our safeguards, and at the end of the day, destroying our free and fair elections. Denise, thanks so much for joining CPAC Now.
Sure. Thank you, Percy.
So before we go, I just want to say let's pray for Father Frank Pavone. He's a dear friend of the CPAC family. He's undergoing heart surgery. We want to make sure that he has a swift recovery, so keep him in your prayers. He's just been such a strong advocate for the pro-life community and just a wonderful spiritual leader in our country. May God bless him and keep him. And also may God bless you and your family and this great country. I got to tell you, I feel stronger now more than ever before that Matt and I and the family here at CPAC, we are committed to saving America. We are committed to stopping the socialist and the communist and the far left. They are going too far, and we have to make sure that we protect our families and our churches, and that's what we're doing every day here at American Conservative Union. Don't forget, you can register to go to CPAC Texas. It is in Dallas, Texas, July 9th through the 11th. Go to conservative.org to register. We'd love to see you there. It is such a wonderful opportunity to meet like-minded conservatives and those who love this country with great patriots. So also make sure to follow us on our social media channels. Tell a friend. Go to @CPAC, or you can follow Matt @MSchlapp. He is very active on all social media channels, or myself @Mercedes Schlapp, and let us know what you think about the show. You know, we want to be talking about what's important to you and what's important to your community, because you can make a difference here in this great country. We are not going to give up anytime soon. So good night, thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.